Hello and welcome to our third 2-Minute Tuesday tip about workflows in a row. If you haven't checked our last two episodes, I recommend that you go and check those out. It will give you a perspective on what we're trying to do with workflows here. But this tip is all about, preventing issues when it comes to updating workflows on your environment. So let's start the countdown and let's go. So what happens is when you need to update a workflow, you need to deactivate it. You cannot make changes to a workflow that is active. So by using a parent and child workflow, but doing most of the work, if not all of the work, at the child workflow level, then what you can do is you can update or deactivate the child record, the child workflow, and while you do work, the parent workflow can be called instead. So here's what happens. If you use only one workflow, then whenever you deactivate that workflow, anything that is supposed to trigger that workflow, it's not going to trigger it because the workflow is inactive. So if I turn it off just like this because I need to do some work on it, and I go ahead and click on deactivated, this workflow happens to run every time a record is created, an opportunity record in this case. You can see this is set to the opportunity. So every time an opportunity is created, this workflow is supposed to run. But if I need to make some changes on it, I'm going to be stuck because the workflow is inactive. So what I want to do is I want to have a very simple parent workflow that all it does is call the child workflow. Now in this case, you see there's a condition for this one, and just one step, a condition, and start the child workflow. So I'm going to go ahead and activate this guy. So the child workflow is the one that is doing most of the work. So if I go in here and I go into the O's for opportunities, so you can tell I like naming my workflows after, the entity they're connected to. So if I go into the O's, you can see right here, this is the child record and it's activated, but I need to do some maintenance. So I'm going to go ahead and deactivate it to work on it. Now, while this process is deactivated, the parent is still active though. So let's go and see what happens if I try to create an opportunity to trigger that flow, right? So I'm going to go ahead and add a topic here. I'm just going to say test, and I'm going to go ahead and save it. Let's see if we're missing any other records. No. All right, so I click on save in here. Boom, the opportunity is created. Now let's go into the system jobs and see what's happening. So now I'm here on the system jobs, and obviously because this workflow is asynchronous, it's going to go ahead and run, behind the scenes a few seconds later. And you can see that the workflow ran, opportunity parent ran, but is waiting for resources. And it will go ahead and continue to wait until you're done updating your workflow. If you were using a child workflow to do all the work or a single workflow to do all of the work, whatever time you spend updating that workflow, you are going to miss the times that workflow was going to be triggered because it has to be inactive in order for you to work on it. So even though you might know exactly what you're going to change and you can just deactivate it and within, let's say, 30 seconds, you're done. If you have a large organization, like you have 100 users, 1,000 users, something like that, there's a big chance that an opportunity will be created and you will miss the boat on that specific workflow from being triggered. Now, in this case, the parent will sit there until I'm done executing the changes that I'm making. So in this case, I'm just going to go back to the process and I'm going to activate it right here. And within a few seconds, we will see that the workflow is completed successfully, right? This workflow will pick up, will run as soon as the child record is active and you didn't miss it. So it will take a little bit longer because the workflow was inactive, the child workflow was inactive, but at least you didn't miss it. It will execute, it will send the emails, it will do whatever it's supposed to do, which is great news. So I hope you enjoyed the tip this week, and we'll see you next week.